All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, January 22nd. We are now halfway through the month. I've made it past week two, starting out week three here, and we have another round of peer review that we will discuss here. You have now finished out your Angry Bots game composition, your Angry Bots sound design, and at this point, you have completed all of the music and sound effects for your both games, both the 2D platformer and Angry Bots. Or maybe you got some feedback with the 2D platformer of some changes that need to be made. Or after the videos that I submitted as feedback for your 2D platformer composition, you might need some changes overall, and especially once you get everything working in the game, you might realize that you need some changes. But you do have the opportunity of revising all of your music and sound effects all the way up until the end of the month. So here in week three, now that you have created all of the music and sound effects, we will start by using Wise to implement both your music and sound effects into the game and get everything working. So by the end of this week, you should have all of the music and sound effects working in both games and be able to test it out. So more than likely, once you get things working, it will reveal some issues or differences or tweaks or improvements or whatever that needs to happen to improve the overall mix, to improve the content, whether it's the music side or the sound effects. Up to this point, you've read through the documentation and you've played the games and you've made your first pass at, like I said, the music and sound effects for both of the games. And once you actually get everything working in the game, we have the opportunity of tweaking things and realizing any changes that need to happen. So that's where we are this week. So in a bit, I have a few submissions here for peer review. We have two submissions from the Angry Bots composition we'll take a listen to. But after that, I'll switch it over to the archive and it will discuss the new assignments for week three. And in that, I'll be discussing Wise and how things are set up. But right now, I do want to go through the process of downloading the correct piece of software, as this part can change. And as I was teaching on campus yesterday, I guess this would be the first time in 2019, I realized over some time between December and January, they slightly changed the piece, not the whole software, but the installer. Changed, I guess, not how to download it, but yeah, you'll see. There's an installer launcher program, and then I want to make sure we get the right version for everybody. Then once you have the correct version installed, it's all the same sort of thing. But that's the little part that I wanted to go through right now to make sure that everybody has the correct version of Wise installed, and to make sure that once you have the right version, then the projects will work correctly. If you just went ahead and downloaded the newest version, even though what we're doing in it hasn't changed, but the technology behind it, it wouldn't work. So we want to make sure you're getting the correct version. So the assignment will send you to go download Wise, and you can do that at audiokinetic.com. Let me pull that up here real quick. So audiokinetic.com. Audiokinetic is the company that makes Wise. Wise is a pretty industry standard piece of software to take music and sound effects and get them working in the game without having to have a programmer follow you at every step to get it all set up. So that we music and sound design folks can use these tools to get everything working. And one of the main reasons that I always like to point out of why we use the piece of software is on their website they have a Powered by Wise tab, and you can see all the games that are using Wise, and these are a list of the current and popular, some of them not so popular, but a lot of the most popular games out there these days are using this piece of software. And we'll talk about audio middleware as a whole. We'll talk about what it does for us and what the purpose is, and I'll dive into that a bit deeper as we get into the assignment. But right now, let me go back here just to the front page. So once you go to audiokinetic.com, there's a Get Wise button here that you can, and then choose Download Wise. However you get to the download page, you're going to download this Wise launcher and install it. Once you download everything, it will look like this. It might have you log in or like create an account. But once you download this Wise launcher software, it'll allow you to go get the correct version of it. And they try to show you and keep you up on all the newest and latest stuff. There's a whole bunch of other really cool projects in here that you can work with, and other videos and things to check out overall. But we're going to go to this Wise tab. I have a whole bunch of different versions installed on my end. This is probably going to be blank up here for you. And you're going to want to go to install install the version. We're not installing the newest version. So we're going to go off of latest. We're going to get the most recent version from 2016. All of our games were built using this version. And the process that we go through, even all of the changes up to the newest version, 2018 version, nothing has changed in the functionality of it. If you download the newest version, it just won't work. But for what we do and what we're talking about, none of the core functionality has changed, even up to the newer versions. So it's all like just a lot of other functions that are beyond the scope of the class. So we're going to go get 2016.2. It will list out, I guess, the most recent, and the version that ultimately you're using is 2016.2.6.6153. Honestly, I think any of these 2016 versions will work, but I just go ahead and get the newest and latest one. Go ahead and you'll have an install button here. When you go into the install, it'll ask you, do you want to install a whole bunch of stuff? The only one you need checked, and to save on a whole bunch of hard drive space, the only one you need here is, I can't even uncheck it, is this gray authoring tool. Other things that are kind of interesting in the samples, there's some other sample projects that you might want to check out, but you don't need anything else except for this authoring tool. So you hit install. Yours is probably going to say install here, and you install the software, and that will get you started on the actual project. That's everything after that, and all of the assignment materials is all the same, but I just noticed, and it's not really all that different, but I wanted to make sure that you're going to all here, choosing 2016.2, and then getting the one and only version there, and installing that. So if you have any other questions or any sort of issues or technical issues using Wise, please let me know. We can troubleshoot anything through this. We don't want any sort of technical issues to get in the way of you actually successfully creating the project or completing the project. So try to download and get Wise running. At least download everything for the assignment, open it up and take a look at everything just to make sure it gets up and working through this week. So that you try to run into any sort of technical issues as early as you can through the week, if it's going to happen. Most of the time, like 90% of the people, 99% of the people get through the process no problem the first time. And I just want to make sure, just because of any sort of technical issues that you might run into, please reach out. So is there anything else I want to say? Other cool kind of things, if you go into samples, like this is kind of after this class, but there are other projects that are available if you download the newer versions of Wise, and it uses the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine. I'll talk more about that this week. These are some of the other tools that folks use to make games. And it will give you a lot of additional material. They have videos and PDFs and like games that you can switch out all of the music and sound effects for. So if you get a feel of all this stuff in the scope of the class and all the projects that you're working on in the class, then yeah, you want to check out some more stuff. There's a lot of other kind of corners in this piece of software that you can find some interesting stuff. So yeah, I think that is what I needed to point out in getting Wise installed. I think that should get everybody up and going. Cool. So we'll get into more of your assignments and implementing 2D Platformer. I'll go through the process and how things are set up. I talk about it in the archive. I talk about it in a series of videos or online, or I guess each assignment has a video. I talk about it in the PDFs. The PDFs are quite, there are a lot of pages to go through, but they're very step-by-step individual, making sure that you can go through and easily progress through. Most people, at least on campus, when we set it up for a 4-hour lab, most people get through that and no problem. So that is, I think, what I needed to point out for the Wise setup. Let's go ahead and take a listen to our submissions here for Angry Bots. I will start out with a discussion of. Let's do this. I'll start out with a discussion of overall, like what we're listening for with this type of composition, and then we'll get into each one of them and talk about what we hear. So, with Angry Bots, there is certainly a reason why it's the second composition of the month. There is a bit more of a puzzle to it and making sure all of these parts fit together. We have 4 different cues that can be playing at any point in time during the game. So we have, and what you can see here, actually, I should point this out. Instead of everybody having their own, like each student having their own track, like we did last week, here, everything is vertically stacked on top of each other. So we have one submission here, and we have our different cues: ambient cue, buzzer action cue, mech action cue, spider action cue, and these are the 3 stingers over here. So we have, each student kind of has this kind of vertical stack of tracks. And I hope that you listened to the bounced files. It's hopefully something like this before you submitted it, so that this is how that's going to play it back in the game. Basically, bounced out all 4 of your files and listened to them together, and even like lined them back up and listened and kind of muted and unmuted things overall. So what we're going to do here, shrink this down, is I'm going to play the part of the computer. We'll start out by listening to the ambient cue. Then we'll bring up the buzzer cue, probably then the spider cue, and then the mech cue. Individually, we'll listen to them by themselves. We'll listen to them in different combinations, and ultimately we'll listen to them with all 4 of them playing to check out. We'll see if we can get a sense of how, if it stays below 0 or if it overloads the master. So that's generally how we're going to be listening to it. So this is what we are focused on overall. The main idea of this composition, the main intention, is the difference between ambient and action. So we have 2 main game states. ambient and action. And we have one ambient cue that will constantly play during gameplay. Will constantly loop around. These compositions, each cue should be somewhere between 1 to 2 minutes long. So the ambient cue will constantly be there, constantly looping around. If you sit in a corner doing nothing else, hiding away from the rest of the game, you'll constantly hear that ambient cue go around. The action cues represent the different battles with the different robots. You have 3 different action cues with 3 different variations of the robots that you encounter. And the real challenge is being able to add and subtract any one of these or any combination of them at any time during gameplay. And as you've figured out going through the assignment and working on your composition, the way that this is done is you make sure that everything starts at the same time, ends at the same time, and will loop together. So I'm just going to take the fader down for the time being, but they all start at the same time, end at the same time, and they will all constantly loop together. That means they should be in the same key, in the same tempo, the same time signature, same length, to make sure that, and also following a similar chord progression, to make sure that they all fit when playing back together and they don't sound like like what I call shoes in a dryer, just flopping all over the place, not making any sense when playing back at the same time. So the biggest thing that can fall apart in this composition is dissonance or clashing notes or clashing rhythms, things being in different keys, things being at different tempos and time signatures. Just visually, both of these look like they are well set up. Obviously, they all start at the same time, they end at the same time. At least visually, they look like they're going to make sense as they play back. And of course, we'll listen to everything. So the different action cues will be introduced whenever the battle starts. So the main one of the main compositional differences is the intensity change or the intensity difference when we switch from ambient to action. So ambient can be loud. Ambient can have a lot of instrumentation in it, or doesn't necessarily need to. It shouldn't be static or unchanging. There should be some development and variation over time during the ambient cue. But however big and loud and strong the ambient cue is, the action cues just need to be much louder and bigger and stronger than that, because they represent the action, they represent the battle. These robots are chasing you around and trying to bent on your destruction and trying to take you down. So it needs to feel like that sort of danger, that intensity is there during these sections. And the way this happens is that you have 4 pieces of music playing, and it fades in and fades out at different times according to what is going on the screen. So we said that we need similar tempo, similar time signature, in the same key, and following the same chord progression. So there's many elements that have to be the same. So the things that are different from one cue to the next is mainly your choice of instrumentation. You want the instruments to represent the robot that it is for. It needs to represent the intensity for that battle. You need to have, typically with the action cue, there needs to be strength and power in the music. A lot of that comes from the introduction of a new rhythm and drums. Powerful instrumentation, whether it's brass or strings, or whether it's synths or guitars, or whatever sort of direction that you want to head. Typically, there is some rhythm, some new percussion introduced, often a new bass line to create power on the low end. And then often, or needed, is some sort of thematic instrument that represents that robot. I don't I kind of shy away from saying it directly. It needs to be a melody. It can be a melody, or because of the style of the game, it could be more sound effect or texture based. But something almost that trains the player when they hear the action cue to know what's going on, like who's coming after them. So strength and power from the rhythm and low end, and then these thematic sort of instrumentation on top makes it recognizable. It also keeps it separate from each cue. Like make sure that you can recognize, like they don't mix together so homogeneously that they disappear against each other. You should be able to hear all four of them or in different combinations and still identify pieces of each individual composition. What else? Let's see. Here in the chat, I think I sort of lost myself when trying to implement new rhythmic ideas with each section. I almost feel like each of my sections give similar energy rather than reflecting the robot to a degree. I was mostly focused on textures versus motifs. Gotcha. So it can be from the instrumentation. It can be from the rhythm. It can be from some soaring melodic line. You can bring that inspiration from different places overall. But whether it is the sound of the drums, the rhythm of the drum, well, it shouldn't be repeated instrumentation. Or even the same MIDI line copied across multiple different instruments. So when they play together, that it sounds like the same instrument. So you do want separation in the composition, but characteristic instrumentation, percussion, rhythm, and or melody will create some sort of identifying factor. So, all right. You'll see what I mean when we listen to it. All right. So, let's see. Similar tempo, time signature, length, different instrumentation, characteristic thematic ideas, and mix. We want to make sure that when all four of these are playing together, that it doesn't overload the master. This will probably make it just fine. This will probably get close also. Depends when we play it back, but definitely make sure that you were paying attention to not just what was happening in the MIDI session, in the production session, but actually to the bounced files. So we want to make sure that the combination of all four of them doesn't overload the master output. What else can I come up with? So that's instrumentation, composition. We need changes and variation in the composition over time to make sure that it's not just repeating the same idea all the way through all minute or 2 minute long composition. In proper intensity, talked about the mix. Yeah, I think that's a lot of what we're looking for. Oh, stingers. Stingers are, we'll listen to those separately. This looks like the correct shape where you have a strong attack on each one of them, and they each fade out to silence. These look like they might be pretty low in volume, although it might work against these. But typically you want loud, strong hit, but they do all look like they reach silence. So, all right, I think that's enough chatting about it. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Do this. We'll start the ambient cue. How about I start from the beginning? That might make sense. So we've got like low bass or pad. We've got this kind of pluck sound. Kind of interesting, kind of almost sounded like this distorted swell or something like that. What was that? All right, I would say it's appropriately ambient and kind of creepy and stealthy. Wandering around, trying not to be found out by the robots. Now I do like, let's see. All right, there's a little bit of a hiccup as it loops around. Just kind of feels like everything starts all over again. So you might want to like double out the MIDI. Here in the chat, love how the ambience of the track gives a lot of tension. Absolutely, some good low end in there. Or I could even probably bring that up a little bit. The only thing I do like the swells. I would like to hear some other change kind of coming here in the second half. I do like the fact that I think maybe this line, that kind of pluck line, does the same thing the first half, second half. So you could, if that's the case, you could change that up a bit more, but also add some other texture here in the second half, or maybe in the middle two parts here, that will create that variation a little bit more, because it's once you get towards the later part of this, it's pretty well established all the way through. Let's bring in the buzzer. I do like the brass and the strings, how they work together. Especially chords like that and changes like that. I do think that the drums are, like the kick snare pattern is a little too bouncy, like a little too dancey overall. I don't know if it, I mean, you might even keep that, but accent it with bigger, kind of bassier drums. Maybe the fact that the kick and the snare kind of smaller in frequency, like a real tight sound. So maybe having some big timpanis or just big bass drums that hit on the bar, that, or just hit every once in a while, bum bum, bada bum, just to create a little more intensity and kind of break up that kind of bouncy rhythm overall. All right, let's bring the spider cue in. Chat. Here being a great addition for intensity in my own work also. All right, so here we got strings. We have, I do like the fact that the hi-hat is at a faster pace overall. What, 16th notes? I might go away from the strings since, well, I guess I'll scroll down here. Since they were already used in the buzzer cue, to create more of that separation, the arpeggiated line helps to make it more identifiable. Like if I go back to the buzzer, like the buzzers, if brass is in buzzer and spider, the thing that makes them sound more separate from each other is the brass in here, and its rhythm, and then this arpeggiator here, and then the hi-hat. So I would probably lean into more for more different instrumentation, more or additional instrumentation, probably a better way of saying it, to create that separation between the buzzer and the spider. A bit of it is the fact that the identifying element, the arpeggiator, feels repetitive. Like it's not like a solid lead line. The melodic line comes from the strings, which was the same as the buzzer, where in the buzzer the melodic line came from the horn. So, and I also from the rhythmic side of things, I like the hi-hat, but I don't know that it needs to be kick snare like this, but some other percussive element or some other rhythm added through here, so it's not just on the hi-hat. Like here, you've got more of this kind of, even if it's that kind of bouncy groove, it's more of a rhythm and helps the intensity, which kind of feels like it comes down a notch when I go to the spider. So adding some other rhythmic elements there will help. Hiccup in the loop feels out of place. Yeah. Oh, there's an open hi-hat in there. Yeah. Yeah, let's see if maybe it's this one. It's just a spider. No, it might just be the ambient cue. Because when you do this one, it's pretty good. So, yeah, a little hiccup when it comes back around. And mech. Cool. Oh, nice. Yeah, I think that works very well. You got the strong kind of kick snare pattern and the live guitar. That definitely has, and some, of course, some like chords in the background, strong power chords. So definitely good power here. You've got that really thematic line, that thematic instrument, which is the guitar, powerful rhythm. So I would say that these two have, like, that brass and that guitar line work well together, and create that kind of forward movement all the way through here, forward development, which means that it'll be hard, I would say, because you got such powerful lines through these, but adding, well, you got it. It's like you have it in the strings, but it just needs to be somewhere else. So whether it's like I think another synth would work here, because this is all strings and brass, this is guitar, and then this could be all synth. So I would, you can keep the strings, but I would do use the melodic line that they're using here and just move it to some other instrument. All right, so let's do this. Excellent. You have a good amount of room still here. Everything is very identifiable, like exists in its own little pocket. Nothing comes in and just swallows some other piece of music. You can hear the brass here. You can hear the lead line here, and you can hear that arpeggiator here. Just let it play for a little bit. So here guitar really glues everything together. Yeah, it, like puts the I don't know, puts the epicness in it, or definitely helps that kind of thing. So I think it makes me want to pick up a laser rifle and go chase some robots around, or something like that. So I think you have done well in probably the more challenging aspect, which is making them all work together and play at the same time, like having those sort of identifiable elements that all work and play nicely is definitely the most challenging aspect. Oh, pardon me. Challenging aspect overall. So everything fits together nicely. I would say only probably this ambient, since it's going to be there constantly, you're going to probably want to work on the loop there. But nice work overall. Compositionally, everything fits well together, and the mix fits nicely within the range that it needed to be. All right. Oops, what am I doing? Let go. Oh. This one. All right, 3 stingers. So stingers, like I said, should have a strong impact. And the challenge with these is you've got such powerful instruments and powerful kind of composition going on here that these are going to need to not sound like brass, strings, guitar, synth. Well, there's synth is pretty wide, but not clash with anything else. And they shouldn't be rhythmic. They shouldn't be pitched or tonal to the point where it would clash with the progression that's going on. So those are the types of things we're listening for overall. Do the last one here. All right, these two kind of get cut off, like that long cymbal tail. This first one sounds more like a sound effect, like an explosion, which makes me. I just wouldn't want it to be confused with some other sound effect in the game. So, where I say it shouldn't have it be pitched or rhythmic and tonal, maybe having some sort of bass drop, or I don't know if just kick would do it, but having more like musical sound design. So you have the strong impact, but typically there's 2 layers where you have the big impact, plus there's some element on top that creates some modulation or change over time. Whether it is a synth or it does have some sort of pitched characteristic to it, or whether it's more of like a low sub that's a drop. But I would want to make sure that it sticks out as part of the music versus the sound effects. This sound, we got to kind of kick drum and crash. This a little slap back in it in the reverb or something like that. I would, again, kind of do the same thing. Add that separate modulation layer on top. This feels like the low-end impact element. So watch out for them getting cut off. You might extend it out a little bit longer in the bounce. But create a little bit more impact here so that it works well against it's like kind of meeting halfway. This more sounds like sound effects. This sounds like musical kicks and cymbal crashes. Kind of meet halfway in those and add another layer of kind of interest or ear candy on the top. All right. So good work overall in this first one. Hopefully it gives a sense of the types of things we're listening for. So let's jump over here to the second one, and probably going to say that the levels of these are going to need to come up so that they can compete well with the power of anything in the game. All right, here we go. Just crank it up here. All right, so good texture overall. Got like a arpeggiator or something happening down the lower range. You got lots of cool like delay kind of stuff going on. There's a cool kind of pulse that you can tell where the music should be overall. So all of that is a good kind of foundation. But just looking at the waveform, there's a little something that comes in there. It would be listening for changes and variations. So let's kind of jump around a little bit, see if... So I would get some good time here to cover, and would probably repeat this sort of, what is it, a 4 or 8 bar phrase, and repeat it a couple of times there. And so just take, and every 2 times it loops around, or 4 times it loops around, or something like that, depending on the bars and whatnot. Add some change, just add another instrument that fades in and does some, like you have, it sounds like you have some of that stuff going on in the background, whether it just needs to be more focused or more of the focus, or if it needs to be just more different. That's probably the correct way of saying that. To be more varied, to create more of that recognizable change over the course. Well, in the chat, I think I took ambient a little too literal and focused more on the atmospheric. Like, there's what you have there, it works well overall. It's just like adding more variation over time. So it's like a good foundation to work from to build up a couple more layers. All right, so let's start next, bring the buzzer next. All right, so we got what, clap and some like this kind of rhythm in the background, an arpeggiated synth line. I'm going to add more layers. Sounds a bit sparse. It works well with this. Bass and drums, like low end, or whether that's brass or just more synths. Just a big bass line will help, and you could just use bigger drums or not so filtered. Maybe they're, I don't know if that's just a filtered kit that you're using, or just needs bigger percussion overall. And again, create more of that change over the course of the cue. And just take the different synths, add in a couple of changes to either the progression or the chords that are being used. Let's go to the spider. So everything that I hear are good elements overall. You just need more, and you need more, I don't know if it's just volume, but more power, more kind of low end kind of stuff. So, like I like that rhythm, like the, almost like a shaker, I guess. The delay works very well. And even that lead line works, but it's just like boom, and he's maybe like a kick, thump, 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 to just push the pacing and that energy forward. All right, let's go with kick, or the mech. There we go. Now we got some more power here. You can even see it in the waveform. All right, so here in the chat, so would you put kicks in every layer? I would not put like this kind of rhythm in every layer. I would use it exclusively for the mech. But having this kick being like, I would sound, it's not an acoustic kick, but it lends itself more to the acoustic kind of sound versus like over here a more electronic, what I would say is like a 4 on the floor kind of kick, thump, 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 more like a techno kind of kick. Whether it's just low bass or synth or kind of synth kick drum. But that could be thump, 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 thump. That would be a kick in that layer. This one has the kick, but it's on a completely different rhythmic pulse. So those two kicks would work. Bump, 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 next to those. This one, to add in a third layer, might prove a little bit more difficult. That's why I typically will reference just a big orchestral, more that like epic percussion kind of idea, where you're not going on the like 4 on the floor quarter note kick, thump, thump, thump. This one's just big timpanis or bass drums or whatever, and it's ba-da-bum, dum-dum. And it leaves a lot of room so that so one is on the bar, one is more on the kick snares on the 2 and 4, and then you've got the more electronic one where it's on the quarter note. And it is about finding room. With rhythm, it's about subdividing rhythms. Some stuff sits on the bar, some sits on half note, quarter note, eighth note, whatever. And then compositionally making everything fit within the chord progression overall. So, rhythmically, well, number one, I would keep everything that you have. Rhythmically build up intensity with the percussion, and then find more instrumentation that weave their way in and out of each cue over time to get away from that sort of 4-bar or 8-bar loop. Excellent. We'll do these. Huh. Excellent. Oh, that's too low. Also a little too low. You probably need more or you do definitely need more impact in these. And I kind of smiled there for just a sec because I think I'm going to do this. And I'm going to take all of you have all the top end, and over here is all of the bottom end. So you guys need to get together and do this. Now the volumes will be way different. Uh-oh, what did I do? I put them on the same ones. No. Over here. And here. There we go. Like this. You need that huge kick, and he needs that cool filter thing on top, or whatever it is. Stingers, spiders. This is ridiculous. I don't know why I need to do this, but I think I need to hear these together. Right? So there's the low impact, and there's the high. Tell me to call me anytime. Nice. Yeah, right? That's the kind of thing. Like a cool modulation thing on top and a big impact down below. This one's, I think, just too low in volume. I'm going to take this down. Yeah, that's too low. This, yeah, I mean, whatever. It's in the ballpark. It's getting there. Cool, interesting delay, reverby modulation thing on top. Big, thunderous impacts down below. At least that's the general idea there. Oops. All right. So, good stuff overall. Oh, please, the microphone. Definitely headed in the right direction. If we are talking, well, let's say we were talking about all the positive stuff, meaning that everything fit together, everything looped together, everything rhythmically. There were no clashing notes or rhythms overall. A lot of it was kind of good foundational stuff, and so it is building out just more of the same, more stronger rhythms, more melodic change and development over time. Here in the chat, so I ran into level issues all the way around. What would you suggest? Suggestion be for boosting signals without getting offensive frequencies when boosting or when bouncing, or even at all, disregarding bouncing specifically. So the way that I handle that type of comp or that sort of setup for mixing, and let me do, well, I could probably do it here. Create track stack, whatever, summing. I'm just doing that to get those out of the way. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of tracks, right? And so let's say ambient 1. Ooh. Ambient 1, ambient 2, ambient 3, ambient 4. And then I've got a couple of the, duplicate them. Oh, you don't duplicate multiples? Boo. Whatever. And then I have, this will take me a moment, hold on. Then I have, what did I think? Yeah, Command D only did one at a time. I like highlighted all 4 of them. I thought I did. Yeah, it was only spitting out 1. So let's say then I have buzzer 1, buzzer 2, buzzer 3, and then I have like a whole bunch of mech tracks. Oh, what did I do here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Mech 1. Mech 2. Mech 3. Mech 4. Mech 5. Ambient buzzer mech. I don't know that I really need to do all these, but whatever. And what? Spider. Spider 1. I could probably say I just take all of my tracks and bust them to masters, subgroup masters. Spider 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3. Okay, so I take all of my ambient tracks and I bust them across the same bus. And I typically, when I do this, I go from like the bottom up, just because I use all these up here for reverbs and whatnot. And you can do it through an aux track. I often will switch this up and make it an audio track, so I can also record it. But we'll just call this ambient or whatever. Yeah, ambient Master. Yeah. So it's in the, you mentioned in the archive. Yeah, we talk about the same sort of thing. So, let's just call this MST. So we take all of these tracks and bust them. I won't even do all the rest of them, but we take all of a certain type of track. We bust them all out. These. Oh, come on. There we go. Bust them all out a certain bus. That'll create an aux. If you want to be able to record it at some point, you can also change it over to an audio track. But then do all your processing on here. Or, I mean, you can do them individually too. That makes no difference. But definitely don't do them on the master. If you do them on the master output, the stereo master, then when you bounce them, it can artificially increase the volume. Then on any of these, I will typically load up a limiter. Let's just do. I could probably actually, you know what? I could probably just do the compressor because I think it has a limiter in it. Do you want to turn the limiter on and the threshold? But I also will just use a separate limiter. And I'll say I want my gain to be like right around -1. And you'll just adjust the overall level until you, like your threshold here and your, well, I guess I want to put my output level here. And then I'll change my threshold here, my gain here, and be able to boost things up. Well, you know what? I guess no, this is a limiter. So I keep my output level at right around -1 here. I could probably even boost it up a little bit more. And I keep my gain there, and I go back to my compressor, and then I'll adjust the threshold and ratio and all the settings here, and just do a little bit of it on the master. And when you go into each one of them, it will help the overall levels and help keep things in control. I think what threw me off to this tip, I thought it was specifically for recording. Nice. All right. So, yeah, that should get you going. That's the way, or at least a very quick and down and dirty way of how you might start setting up these tracks and making it organized. And then you can watch this ambient master. You can mix these levels as much as you want and do whatever craziness you want over on the individual ones or on the faders here. I keep this at unity and watch this meter, and then make sure that all 4 of these, the ambient, buzzer, spider, and mech, are all at unity and is not totally destroying that. And if they are, then I either go back over here and turn these down, or sometimes when it's like real late at night and nobody's watching, I'll just turn these down to make sure that it just stays within wherever it needs to be here. So, all right, that is what I want to share with all of this. Please let me know as you progress through as you progress through the week, if you have any questions going forward with Wise. With the rest of your assignments, anything like that. I'm going to turn it over to the archive. Sometimes when it's late at night, nobody's looking, I'll turn my bus down. Don't tell anybody, though. Don't want that to get out, of course. So anyway, let's go ahead and wrap it up there. We will switch it over to the archive, which will explain more of how things are set up in Wise. And we'll meet again on Thursday. Actually, no, I am sorry. I am going to actually have to cancel the Thursday session, although nobody's been able to make it to the Thursday session. So I do have a family event to take care of, family matter. So there will be no live class on Thursday. I'll post an announcement up on that, but I'll send out the archive just the same on Thursday. All right. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards. But other than that, have a good one, and we'll meet again next Tuesday. All right. Thanks a lot. The week 2 assignments into the new week 3 assignments. And I want to go over just a few of the aspects of how to set up your Wise session, how to use Wise, of course, and how to import your music and your sound effects and get them working in the game. There's a couple of things that will you want to make sure that you start from the very beginning to make sure that this is all going to work correctly for you. And the first one is to make sure that you have the proper version of Wise set up and installed. So for this month, we are using the Wise version 2016, and my version will load up here on this end in just a sec. Make sure you have the correct version of Wise installed. If not, you would go back to the Audio Kinetic webpage and install the correct version, which looks like this. Hold on just a sec. Come here. Come here, webpage. You would go to Audio Kinetic's web page and download Wise over here. This is going to download the Wise launcher, which looks like this, the Wise launcher. And in here, you want to make sure that you've gone to Wise. I'll do this later. You go to Wise, and you want to make sure that the version's installed. One of them says 2016 on it. If not, then you can do install new versions and make sure you have a 2016 version installed. It shouldn't matter which one you do, but just go for the most recent one, the biggest number, right? Which at the time of filming is 2016.2.6.6153. Just get the newest one and install that, and when you launch, it will look something like this. So, now, first and foremost, you need to have the correct version of Wise installed, and there's more detailed instructions on FSO to get that installed. The next thing would be to have a couple of files set up on your desktop to make this project work. So what we are going to do is we'll go to FSO here and show you all of the files that you have to download. So let me find that real quick. I am going to go. Let me get to the correct class first. All right, so here we are in week 3. You should download everything, go through and watch the Wise overview video that is an overview of Wise. It leads you through windows and menus and the overall structure of your files. And you'll download also the 2D platformer Wise setup and Angry Bots Wise setup. We'll be talking about that next week, or not next week, on our next session, and our chiptune composition, which I'll also talk about today. So let's start out here with our 2D platformer Wise setup. In here, there's a video that will recreate a lot of what I'm saying here. So there's a bit more detailed information there. And there's also all of the downloads for the assignment. There is a PDF that also follows along step by step with all of this process. You can download the video from above, but make sure you download this 2D Platformer Wise zip file. This is the session that we will be using, so make sure you have a copy of that downloaded. You're also going to need a copy of the game, which you should already have downloaded, but if you need to find, again, a copy of the game, you can go back to week 1, where we started 2D Platformer, go to the game composition assignment, and re-download this zip file. That's what where the copy of the game is. So let's go ahead and set up a couple of things that we need to. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a folder. I'm going to do this all on my desktop, and I recommend that you do the same while you are working on the project, so that all of the files are easily accessible. I'm going to name this 2D Platformer. And in this folder, I'm going to take that zip file that we just downloaded from FSO. I'm going to unzip it. I don't need the zip file after that, so I'll just take that folder. This is the WISE project that is provided. This is what we're going to use with all of the files that we need, so we'll just start with a copy of that. Then we're going to get a copy of the game, as I mentioned before. Go into your downloaded version of the game application and make sure that these two files are next to each other. This is extremely important to make sure that this works properly. If the 2D Platformer file is not there, right next to this 2D Platformer Wise folder, it will not work, which is also stated here on FSO. In the assignments, if these two files, warning, make sure you have these two files next to each other or things will not work, right? So make sure if you are having any sort of issues at the end of this process, make sure that you have everything set up correctly. It will solve a lot of any sort of troubleshooting you might encounter. All right, the other thing we're going to do is create a folder called Media. And in this media folder, I'm going to create another folder called Music. If I can spell it right, Music. And I'll create another one called Sound Effects. And this is, I'm going to put all of my music and sound effects in here that I created, just so I can have quick and easy access to those. So let me do that real quick. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my original composition files and a copy of my sound effects and bring them in there, which looks like this. So I'm going to go get all of my music files. I'm going to take a copy of those. Let's try that again. Drop my music in my music folder. I'm going to back up, go find all of my sound effects. Should have 18 sound effects. And I'm going to make a copy and put that in my sound effects folder. And this is for no reason other than to have very quick, easy access to all the files that I need. All right, at this point, I can launch WISE and make sure I open up the project to get started somewhere. It would load up. Should just be patient here. And we are going to navigate to the project that we need. You probably don't have this project right here. Your recent projects is probably blank. We just need to hit Open Other, and then navigate to that project, which is on your desktop. It's called 2D Platformer. You're going to go to 2D Platformer Wise, and then you're going to find this 2D Platformer Wise project, the wproj file. This is the session. Double click that, and Wise will load it up. It provides you with all of the setup that you need to get started on the project. So we are going to start out by working on the music. We're going to get that set up, and then we are also going to set up the sound effects. And I will kind of go through it at a quicker pace here. It is explained in a bit more detail in the other videos, but I do want to kind of show an overview of how this is going to work. All right, so we have different layouts that we'll be using. We'll mostly be alternating between the designer layout and the interactive music layout. And I'm also going to be spending time switching between the audio tab, the events tab, and the soundbanks tab. So audio is where all of my audio is going to go. I'm going to import all of my WAV files here. I'm going to set them up and make them work appropriately for the game. Audio is added to events. And events are the messages that are sent from the game into Wise. The game has no idea about your music or your sound effects, has no idea about the audio. All it knows is that if it calls out these commands or these messages, that Wise will respond and play the correct audio file. So all we're going to have control over is when the music begins and when it ends. And this will create all of the interactivity that we need for our music. And then whenever we need a particular sound effect in the game just calls one of these events and it plays the corresponding sound. We'll have to set that up, but that is our overall approach with our events. So audio is attached to events, and both audio and events end up in sound banks. Sound banks are one of the final formats that is used by the game itself. When you are done with your session, you do not bounce a file like you do in a DAW. You create your entire composition and you bounce out the final version. Here in Wise, you are going to build the project. And when you build the project, it creates a couple of files that the game can use to actually play back while somebody is playing the game. When you go to sell and distribute your game, you do not want to have a whole bunch of loose WAV files sitting on the game disk that everybody can steal and change and have access to copyrighted material. So instead, these sound banks will encrypt the files. It will take all of your WAV files, all of the data that you put into Wise, and encrypt it in something. It's not really a zip file, but it can kind of sort of be thought of as a zip file, where it's a file that contains a whole bunch of other files that is encrypted and compressed, and also is set up to work on multiple different platforms. So Wise speaks the language of a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation, a Sony PlayStation, or a Microsoft Xbox, or an iOS or an Android device. It speaks all of these different languages, and the sound bank converts all of the files and is the file that the game actually uses. So this is just a quick overview of the types of files we'll be interacting with. So I'm going to start out by creating the music system. Setting up the music to work properly in the game. We have two events, when the music begins and when the music ends. So already set up in the game, when the game starts, it calls out this command or this event called play music begin. So when the game starts, this is what we want to do with your music. You have 3 intro files. The game is going to randomly choose one of them. It's going to play that file. Then when it's done, it's going to transition into the main loops. Then there are 3 main loops. It is going to randomly choose a main loop file and play it all the way through until it's done. Then it plays the next main loop file. Randomly chooses another one, plays all the way through that, and then it'll randomly choose another one, and keep doing that forever until the game is over. When the game is over, when you when you lose all of your health. The game is over when the character falls off the level, kind of falls into the sludge down below. When the game is over, musically, we want any music that was playing, we want that to stop. And then when it does, then we're going to play one of the 3 ending cues. Randomly choose an ending and play it. And then it will play it once, it'll stop, and then the whole game will start all over again. So that's a general setup of our music. We start out in the audio tab here, and we are going to drag our music to we are going to drag our music to this default work unit in the interactive music hierarchy. We have a master mixer hierarchy, we have an actor mixer hierarchy, we have an interactive music hierarchy. I think these are long, drawn-out ways of saying something pretty simple. The master mixer hierarchy is all of our buses. This is our master output bus. If we had a dialogue bus, a music bus, a sound effects bus, if we had different groups of sounds or instruments or music together, this will contain all of our buses to organize it. Actor mixer is all of the sound effects. When we set up all of our sound effects, we're going to drag the WAV files here. We are going to set them up appropriately. The interactive music hierarchy is for the music. So basically we have buses, sound effects, and music. Each one of these has something called a default work unit. And we actually will not be using these default work units except for to basically organize our files. We are not, the basics of a default work unit allows multiple people to work on the same session at the same time or at different times. So you can, a default work unit is a unit of work. It's some files, it's some process that you want to do, and you are going to take that work, move it over to your computer, work in your session, and then bring it back into the main session. Since everybody is working on their own individual projects, we're really not using these to their full potential, and it's not necessary. But if you were working on a large team, it allows you to separate the work that's done by everybody and still bring it back together in a session that makes sense. All right, so we're going to start out with our music. I'm going to go back to the folder where we created and imported all the files that we needed, or kind of organized all the files we needed. I'm going to go to my music here, and I'm going to drag these into the interactive music hierarchy. And I am going to drop them right on the default work unit here. So I dragged all of these files down here right on top of this default work unit. And this audio file importer window pops up. Right now, the default is perfectly fine, and we can hit import at this point. There's a lot of settings that you could set up here if you had specific uses for the files, but the defaults will work just fine. We can hit import. It's going to import all of our files. We now see our music endings, our intros, and our loops in Wise. And we need to set up a way for these files to play back together. Right now, they're just individual, so we need to group them together in certain ways so that they play back correctly in the game. If you were going to load up a whole bunch of music for a party and you put it into iTunes or your favorite music player and you wanted to sequence them to play in a certain order, you would put them in a playlist. Playlist is a very common term for kind of sequencing music together, and we are going to do the same thing here. We are going to put our intros and our main loops together in a playlist so that when the game starts, it's going to play back these files correctly. I can highlight all of these files, and then I can put them together in a playlist. Let's see here. Can I widen this out? Show me all the buttons. Let's see. There we go. Sorry. Before I highlight all of these, I'm going to click on the default work unit up here, and this button right here in the middle says Create New Playlist, Music Playlist Container. This is the icon that we're going to use to create that container. Everything in Wise is a container. Well, not everything, but containers contain other files. That's mainly the approach that they're going for with that terminology. But if we want to now highlight all of these intros and main loops, we can drag them into the playlist container. And we're going to rename this. I can either rename it over here. I can right-click and choose Rename. And I'm going to call this Music Playlist, no, Music, sorry, Begin underscore Playlist. All right, so a playlist allows us to sequence our files together. We have these files set up. I'm going to create another playlist. I'm going to click back on my default work unit, and I'm going to click this icon for another playlist, and I'm going to call this Music End underscore Playlist. I'm going to drag all of my endings here. And now, this kind of organizes them together, but it doesn't actually set up any sort of order or sequence for these playlists. And that is done in the interactive music layout. If I go to the Layouts menu, I choose Interactive Music, and it gives the windows change a little bit, and I need to go down here. This portion is called the Music Playlist Editor. So if I click on Playlists, I can see the appropriate order of all the files. So I'm going to start out up here, Music Begin Playlist. It's empty right now, so I'm going to drag in all of these intro files one at a time. Unfortunately, you cannot select and highlight multiple files at the same time and drag them in. Just click on each one of them, drag it into the playlist. If you accidentally click off of the playlist, you'll see these waveforms. If somehow you get lost in here, you see these waveforms, always click back on the playlist. We'll get you back to the playlist editor. This is one of the more tedious and difficult aspects of making this work, is just kind of navigating around. Make sure you always select back to the playlist, and you can have your 3 intros and your main loops playing here. All right. Now, this playlist says sequence continuous. That means it's going to play these in a sequence continuously. It's going to start at intro 1, and then it's going to play intro 2, then intro 3, then main loop 1, 2, and 3, which is not at all what we want to do. So let's start here. All right, so it plays them in order. Which is, like I said, not at all what we want. We want of the 3 intros, we want one of them to be chosen once, and then it's going to move into the main loops, and we want it to then randomly choose main loops infinitely, and just do it over and over again. So we need to group these files together. We have the intro group and the main loop group. I am going to click on my sequence continuous segment up here, so I guess it would be a group. I'm going to create new groups. Sometimes if it puts a group inside of another group, you can just kind of drag them out of each other. You want to make sure that each of the groups are on the same level. So we're going to drag these 3 intros in here. Intro 1, 2, and 3. Oops, I missed. All right, there's intro 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to go main loop 1, 2, and 3. All right, so this still doesn't solve anything because, again, sequence continuous plays them in a sequence continuously. It's going to go from the first one down into the first group here. It's going to play 1, 2, and 3, down to the second group, a main loop 1, 2, and 3, and then be done. So we have a couple of different options here. We have sequence continuous, sequence step, random continuous, and random step. So we have sequence, the words sequence and random, and continuous and step. Sequence means it plays them in order. Random means it plays them in a random order. Continuous means that when the first one is done, it'll play the next one. Step means that you have to hit play each time, or you have to trigger the event each time for it to move forward. It will randomly set something up or play it in sequence, but it has to be poked each time to make it work. So in this case, the top layer needs to be sequence continuous because once it goes from this, we want it to go down to here. But when it goes into the intro group, we want it to randomly choose it, but we only want that to happen once. So we're going to choose that to random step. So it's going to randomly fire one of these off and play at one time, and then it's going to go down to the next one. This one we're also going to set to random step. So it's going to come down to this one, play, randomly choose one of them, and only play at one time, though, which is not what we want for the main loops because we want that to go on infinitely. So there's this other column over here called loop count. It says how many times do you want it to do that thing. And for the main loops, you want it to do it infinitely. If you hit the down arrow on this second main loop group, you can switch it to infinite, and it will play through this section. It will randomly choose one of them, fall out, but come back through this loop infinitely for as long as the game is being played. So let's try this out. If I click this main music begin playlist and hit play, it's going to randomly choose an intro, but only do that once, and then jump down into the main loops and hopefully do this infinitely. So it is switching, and it's doing exactly what we wanted it to. So random step will work for each one of your groups, and you want to set the music to be infinite. If it only plays one time and stops, we want to make sure that we want to set it to play infinitely. All right. So this is how this playlist should work. Let's go to our music end playlist. This is going to be really simple. We're just going to drag all three of our endings in here and set it to random step so that it just does this once. Randomly chooses an ending, plays it, and then it's over. The game will start over again, and all of the music will start again. All right, so this is how the audio is set up, but this doesn't set up the events. Once we have the WAV files controlling as we want them, I'm just going to go up to Project here. I'm going to do Project Save. We should have probably done that a while ago, but save. Also notice that it's not Command S, it is Control S to save properly in 2D platformer. For reasons that the application kind of thinks it's a Windows application, but it's just wrapped and running on Mac. So I just typically just go hit File Save to be sure. All right, now we have set up our audio. Now it's time to move on to the events. We have two events. We have music begin and music end. So setting up the music begin should be pretty straightforward. All we need to do is to play this music begin playlist. So let me take a step back here. Events have actions. There's a anytime you click on one of these events over here, you're going to get access to these double arrows, and you have different actions like play, break, which will allow you to kind of pause and move on to the next thing. Post event, which will allow you to trigger any other events. You can stop, you can pause, you can mute, you can change a bus volume, you can change an individual audio file's voice volume, you can change the voice pitch, you can add a low pass filter, a high pass filter, you can change mix states, you can turn on and off switches, change game parameters. There's a lot of different things that you can do from these events. Remember, these are the messages that are sent from the game. The game knows nothing about your audio file. It just calls out these different events, and Wise takes care of the rest. So this music begin playlist, we want to play something, and then we hit browse. When you hit browse, it may look like this. It maybe looks like this, and it's kind of grayed out. Doesn't look like there's anything to choose. But if you go to the, let's see here, where is it hidden? What did I do here? I do play, browse. I go to the actor mixer hierarchy, and the interactive music hierarchy. I'm in my music. And I want to play this music begin playlist. Once I hit OK, well, actually, you want to play the music begin playlist. You do not want to play any of the individual files, or it'll just play that one file. You set up all the interactivity in the playlist, so make sure you trigger that. At this point, if I hit play, it will play that event. Notice it says play music begin down here in the transport, so you know which event you're playing. And it starts playing that playlist. And it gets to the part where it randomizes, and it will do that infinitely. So next is the end playlist. The end event. The first thing we want to do is we want to stop the music begin playlist. Anything that was playing, no matter where you were, when the game is over, you're going to turn it off. So we have the play event. We also have a stop event. We want to stop just this one file. We don't want to stop everything. You could stop all of the audio in the game if you wanted to. Probably wouldn't be a very good idea right now. But we hit stop, and we want to stop that music begin playlist. That will cut off the previous music. Now we want to play. And we'll hit browse again, and we want to play the ending. Oops, let me try that again. Hit browse. We want to play the ending cue. All right, so when the game is over, it's going to call out play music end. That's going to stop the music that was playing and play just one of the random files in the end playlist. All right. So that should set up our music. Let's hit play. Let's hit begin. Let's go over to the ending. And it should stop, end there, and be done. All right. So I'm going to go back to Project Save. Now that I have my music set up, I am going to go back to the Audio tab, and now I'm going to tackle the sound effects. These should be pretty straightforward. Most of it is just you have the events. Again, the events are really important. It tells you all of the files or all of the messages that the game can speak, all of the messages that it can send you, and you basically need to respond with audio. And you'll see these match the sound effects: bomb boom, bomb fuse, bomb pickup, bomb set down, enemy death, gunshot, health pickup, jump, ouch, and taunt. So we need to set up these events. We need to start over in the Audio tab. We are going to work on the actor mixer hierarchy now on this default work unit. This is for the sound effects. I'm going to go back over to my sound effects over here, and I'm just going to highlight all of my WAV files. Again, this is why we kind of organized it all together so you have quick access. Highlight all of my WAV files and drag them into my actor mixer hierarchy. You want to make sure you go on that default work unit right here. Make sure you drag onto that. And once you do, then you can see this audio file importer screen Again, all of the files should be just fine, so we're going to hit import. I'll just go to project save. And now I have all of my WAV files. They'll start out blue. Blue audio files mean that they have not been converted yet into the format that is necessary for the game. This will happen when you build the sound bank. One of the things the sound bank does is compress all the files, convert them, change them into any formats that are necessary. But for the time being, it should work just fine that they are blue, but throws some people off when they see the different color there. So most of these are fine. If I just go ahead and play a sound, we hear the sounds being played.
Bums away.
So one thing we need to do are for these files that have multiple different versions: enemy death 1, 2, and 3, jump 1, 2, and 3, ouch 1, 2, and 3, and taunt 1, 2, and 3. We want them in a single event, or each one of them has their own kind of single event. We don't want the 3 files to be played at the same time, so we want to randomize them. So I'm going to click on this default work unit again, and up here, this icon that looks like all the little dots at the top, this is called a random container. And a random container allows you to randomize files. Anytime it asks, it's just going to randomly feed it a file. So we're going to create a couple of these, and I'm going to name them SFX enemy death. Probably don't need to capitalize everything. Then I'm going to create another one. Each time I'm going to click on the default work unit. I'm going to click this icon here to create another random container. And I'll just create a couple of them, so I don't have to keep going back. All right, the next one, I am going to go SFX, and I'm going to name this jump. I'll just right click this time and do rename. Oh, let's try that again. There we go. This time I'm going to call it SFX ouch. And the last one here is SFX taunt. There we go. So I'm going to take all of my enemy death files. I'm going to drag them into enemy death. I'm going to take all of my ouch files and drag them into ouch. I'm going to take all of my taunt files and drag them into taunt. Going to take all of my jump files and drag them into jump. All right, so this should get all of our audio files set up for the game. I'm just going to, again, go back to Project Save. Now all we need to do is set up the events, which should always, each one of these should be real simple to do. So all we need to do is go ahead. We are going to play a file. We can hit Browse, and this time I'm going to go up here to my actor mixer hierarchy. This is Bomb Boom, so I'm going to choose Bomb Boom. You don't even go to the next one. You don't even have to hit play in this. It'll just do it automatically. If you hit Browse, this is Bomb Fuse, so I'll set that one up. This is Bomb Pickup. I'll hit Browse, and I'll choose Pickup. I'll go to Set Down, hit Browse, choose Set Down, go to Enemy Death, hit Browse. This time I want to make sure I choose the random container. Do not choose the individual files. You want to use the random container itself. So I'll set that one up. There's enemy death. Here's gunshot. Browse. Gunshot. Health pickup. Browse. Health pickup. Jump. Again, I've selected the jump random container. Ouch. Select ouch random container. Taunt. Select taunt random container. All right. Now I have messages. Seem to work.
Oh.
All right. At this point, I am ready to go. I can build the game, or I can build the project and test it out in the game to make sure everything is playing back properly. And this is done by going to the Layouts menu again, and we're going to choose Sound Bank. And over here in the Sound Bank, you'll notice that there's one sound bank here called Sound Bank. It is set up for the Mac platform, and the English is set to, oh no, English. The language is set to English. So we're ready to go. All we should have to do at this point is hit generate. And when you hit generate, this message will pop up, and it says evaluation mode. Sound banks contain 27 media items out of 200. It gives you this generic message, and it should have built all of the files correctly. The way you can test this out is you go out of Wise, and you go to this game application that we brought into this folder. Now, when early on, we made sure that this application is next to this folder so that when you hit generate, it actually backs out of all of this 2D Platformer Wise folder and knows to go into here. And then let me show you the location that it drops the files. If we do show package contents, we can actually get a folder structure of this application. Go to apps, go to contents. Resources. Now you don't actually have to do this, but it'll show you what's going on here. In resources, we'll go to data. In data, we'll go to streaming assets. In streaming assets, we will go to audio. We'll go to generated sound banks and the Mac folder. And right here today, at the current time, it shows that we have created this file. The setup that we have done in Wise is now going to play back in the game. So now let me back out of all of this, and you can now run the game application and hear your music and sound effects play. There is a little bit more information about how to appropriately mix and how to adjust levels. I'll leave that up for the video game. Well, you have to do it for the video game. I'll leave that up for the video. To explain a bit more detail, but that should get you up and running and make things work properly for the game. Again, if you reach this point and you are in Wise and you have generated here and the message that pops up is in red and it gives you all sorts of errors, read the errors, make sure that you're not missing a file. Sometimes it's complaining about the setup inside of Wise. Or other times, if you go try to play the music and you don't hear anything, it would be the fact that this 2D Platformer application and the 2D Platformer Wise folders were not next to each other when you built. So double check that. Or if you have any other issues, please get in contact with us, and your instructor can help you out. So what else? Let me go back to here. That's the overall approach for 2D Platformer. And on Thursday, we'll talk a bit more on Angry Bots. I'll point out a few more interesting approaches for how Angry Bots will be set up in Wise. Please work on these projects throughout the week so that we can answer any questions before the weekend. Don't leave it to Sunday night in case any sort of issues come about. And the last project I want to discuss here is your chiptune composition. It's not entirely Wise. We do have a composition this week. We will listen in peer review next week for anybody that submits. But this is a composition in the style of the original Nintendo platform. It is a traditional linear composition. It doesn't have to loop. It's not interactive in any sort of way. The composition itself is 1 minute to 2 minutes long. And I'm most interested that you are following the restrictions of the original Nintendo system to kind of get a sense of what composition was like back in these earlier systems overall. And so with this project, I was a bit hesitant at first when we started this, thinking that it would end in less than optimal compositions, less than listenable music because of the limitations of the sounds. The sounds don't really sound all that great or aren't as interesting or complex compared to modern synths and DAWs. But what I ended up finding is that most people end up having your focus on the composition a whole lot more, and you're not hiding behind kind of the production and the sounds and things like arpeggiators and drum machines that will do it all for you. And so there's a strong focus on the composition and the development of the music. So again, there is about a minute long composition. When you download the project, you get a session that a Logic session that provides all of the sounds that you are going to be using for this composition, for this project. So some of the main restrictions are, number one, you have to use the sounds that are provided with the project. Those come in the form of EXS24 sound banks. If you click on any one of these tracks, they are all equipped with EXS24, and you have a couple of presets that were sampled directly from the original Nintendo and Famicom systems. And so these are very simple, straightforward effects. They're not all that wonderful sounding, but they are very musical, very melodic, and so you might spend more time at a faster pace or with staccato instrumentation so that you don't stick too long on holding a chord, so that there's a lot more movement and energy to the mix. So let's see here. Can I even get something going? So provided are a couple of chiptune sound banks. Let's see here, like drums, and basic tones and synths. So you have to use the sounds that are provided by for the project. You are limited to only 4 simultaneous instruments playing at the same time. You can use more than 4 tracks. You just can't have more than 4 playing at any one time. So you can have as many as you want. Four. That means one of them has to be a drums, one of them has to be melody. You need drums and melody at some point in the composition. The other 2, you could have drums, bass, harmony, melody. You could have drums, harmony, melody, melody, or like drums, harmony, melody, counter melody, or drums, melody, melody, melody. It depends on how you want to approach it. But you can have any combination as long as you have drums and a melodic idea. Of course, the progression, the melody all need to develop over the course of the minute or so composition. You can have more than 4 tracks. You just need to make sure that they are there's only 4 of them playing at any one time. What else? So you have to use the sounds. You're limited to the number of tracks. You have to have drums. You have to have melody. Oh, the melody has to change at some point. In order to do that, you're probably best to duplicate a track. And let's see, track. Well, let me just do it this way. I'm thinking too hard. So duplicate the track, and then use another sound for your lead melody, but only 4 of them playing at any one time. So I have a couple of student submissions. These are some of the better ones that I've had, but it shows you the capability of what is possible. So here is the first one. do it this way. Hold on, I want to make sure I have a volume control. One moment. All right, so this one really shows why faster, more staccato movements and a faster pace overall works very well to maintain energy from the cues or maintain energy through the piece. Especially this part right here. So faster arpeggiated parts, like arpeggios moving through the chord changes, work well to outline and give a lot of material to pull from. Here's the next one. Let's see, let's try this. So good energy, lots of changes also throughout. Big sweeps through chords. Having things on the quarter note, eighth notes, 32nd, or 16th and 32nd gives a lot of room for all these changes. So, and each one of these is only 4 tracks playing at any one time. They're just constantly switching their sounds back and forth. All right, and one more. And there's just a whole lot of movement in here. Again, these are kind of really classic chiptune approaches where you're repeating the notes or doing quick sweeps through arpeggios. All right, so a lot of activity, a lot of great ideas through each one of those. Certainly those are the top end of the spectrum of the overall quality, but hopefully gives you some inspiration about where these might go. All right, so that is all of the different aspects we wanted to talk about. We wanted to go over the week 2 submissions. Good job for everybody that did submit from the Angry Bots composition, and hopefully it inspires more people to submit for our chiptune peer review that we will do next week. And we talked about the 2D platformer assignment and the chiptune assignment. We'll dive into the Angry Bots later on this week. All right. So please let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, we'll keep moving forward. We'll get into next week and talk about wrapping everything up for the month. So, all right. Let me know if you have any questions. And other than that, have a good day. Thanks.